What if a 6-year-old boy saved a billionaire's life? Without even knowing it, a single sentence, spoken with innocent honesty, stopped a man from giving up forever. Years later, on an unexpected blind date, their paths crossed again, and the truth waiting at that table would change 3 lives. This is not just about love. It's about survival, second chances, and a family you never see coming. Stay, because the twist will break your heart and heal it. Rain hammered down on an empty park in Chicago's North Side. Streetlights flickered, their glow bleeding into the fog. On a worn-out bench, a man sat motionless. His shoulders slumped like the weight of the world had crushed him. His name was Mark Bennett. Once hailed as a visionary CEO, tonight he was nothing more than a broken figure in a drenched gray suit. In his hand, an unopened bottle trembled as thunder rolled across the sky. He pressed the glass against his forehead, eyes hollow. "Maybe this is it," he muttered under his breath. The rain didn't answer. It only fell harder, as if urging him to vanish quietly. But then came the sound. Small footsteps splashing through puddles. Not steady, but light, playful, unafraid. A boy, no older than 4, appeared in the mist. His rain boots were far too big, his jacket crooked, and in one hand he clutched a crumpled tissue. He stopped right in front of the man. "Sir," the boy said softly, tilting his head. "It's okay to cry." Mark blinked, startled. "What?" The boy held out the tissue with serious eyes. "Mom says, hearts just need hugs sometimes." The words sliced through Mark like lightning. His grip on the bottle loosened. For the first time in months, his chest heaved with something other than despair. He took the tissue with shaking fingers. His voice cracked, barely audible. "Why would you say that?" The boy shrugged. "Because it's true." Then, as simply as he came, he turned and skipped toward a figure waiting under a distant umbrella. Mark lifted his head, rain mixing with tears. The boy vanished into the storm with his mother. But the echo of that tiny voice stayed. Hearts just need hugs sometimes. That night, Mark did not end his life. Instead, he went home, opened a notebook, and scribbled the first line of an idea that would one day change everything. What if machines could understand feelings the way children do? 2 years later, in the heart of Minneapolis, golden light spilled across polished glass walls. A cafe, upscale yet quiet, hummed with jazz and low conversation. It was the kind of place where time slowed down. The door creaked open. A woman stepped in, holding the hand of a 6-year-old boy. Her dress was neat, her posture steady, but her eyes carried shadows. Her name was Claire Dawson. Life had not been kind. Once a teacher loved by her students, now she worked part-time at a bookstore just to survive. Beside her, Ethan clutched a small sketchbook under his arm. He looked around curiously, eyes bright, innocent, unscarred by the burdens his mother carried. Claire's heart pounded as she spotted the man waiting at the far table. Broad-shouldered, sharp jawline, a tailored navy suit. He looked exactly like the photo her friend had shown her. "That must be him," she whispered. The blind date she almost canceled, the one she felt foolish for showing up to with a child in tow. She swallowed hard and walked closer. "I'm sorry," she began softly, her voice almost breaking. "I couldn't find anyone to watch him. If this is too much, Don't apologize." The man's voice was calm, even warm. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, weren't on her. They were locked on Ethan. The boy tilted his head, studying him. Then, with the blunt honesty only children have. He said, "You look like the man from the park. Are you still sad?" Mark froze. Every sound in the cafe seemed to vanish. His throat tightened as that voice, that exact voice from the storm, rang through him again. Claire blinked, confused. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" The boy simply shrugged and tugged on her sleeve. He was sitting alone. I gave him a tissue. Mark's hands clenched under the table. Memories crashed back the rain, the despair, the small boy who saved his life. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I think I owe your son more than you know." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark shook his head gently. "Please, sit down." Still uncertain, she helped Ethan into the smaller chair and sat across from him. The waitress brought menus. Ethan pulled out crayons and began coloring on the back of the kid's menu like this was any normal evening. Mark's gaze stayed on him, unblinking. "Has he always been like this?" Claire looked up. "Like what?" He gestured toward the boy, who was now picking up a spoon someone had dropped and handing it back to the waitress. "This gentle, this aware." Claire's eyes softened. "Yes, always. Even as a baby. If another child cried, he'd cry too. He just feels everything." Mark's lips curved, but his eyes carried something deeper. Reverence, pain, gratitude. Claire shifted nervously. "I hope he's not too much. I almost canceled, but..." Mark leaned forward. His voice was steady. "He's not too much. And neither are you." Her breath caught. No one had said words like that to her in years. Her hand trembled as she lifted her cup of tea. She prayed he didn't notice. "Look," Ethan chirped suddenly, holding up his drawing. 3 stick figures stood under a sun, one with long yellow hair, one with a tie, and one small figure holding a balloon. "That's us. Mommy, me, and you." Claire chuckled nervously. "He includes everyone." Mark's chest tightened. "I'm honored." For the first time that evening, the silence between them wasn't strained. It was gentle, safe. Claire leaned back, cradling the warm cup between her palms. Ethan rested against her shoulder, humming quietly as he colored. Across the table, Mark watched. Something shifted inside him 2 years ago. That voice saved me from the edge. Now, it's sitting here again, reminding me how to live. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass. Inside, 3 lives unknowingly began to intertwine through loss, through chance, and through the smallest act of kindness. Sometimes, a boy's voice in the rain doesn't just save your life. Sometimes, it leads you back to the family you never knew you needed. The cafe lights flickered against the glass walls, but Claire's thoughts drifted elsewhere. She stirred her tea absent-mindedly, eyes tracing the steam. Memories had a way of sneaking in, uninvited, especially at moments like this. 2 years ago, she was standing in front of a classroom. Second graders filled the air with laughter, their desks covered in glitter and crayons. Teaching wasn't just her job, it was her sanctuary. That morning, her voice was hoarse. Just a sore throat, she thought. She asked her husband, Daniel, to pick up Ethan from preschool. "It's just a quick favor," she had said with a smile. Daniel kissed her cheek. "I'll be back before dinner." It was the last sentence she ever heard from him. By afternoon, the phone rang. A stranger's voice, a truck, a rainy intersection, a collision no one could walk away from. The phone slipped from her hands. Ethan toddled up, tugging her sleeve. "Why isn't Daddy home yet?" Claire turned away, burying her scream in a pillow so her son wouldn't hear her shatter. Grief didn't just break her, it remade her. She took a short leave from teaching, swearing she'd return. But going back meant walking past the desk where Daniel once left her coffee. It meant forcing a smile in a place that had been theirs. Weeks turned into months. The bills stacked like bricks, one over another. Sleep became a stranger. Friends sent texts at first, then invitations stopped coming. Silence replaced support. She found work at a small bookstore near the river. Quiet, unassuming. It didn't demand joy from her, only her presence. On slow days, she brought Ethan along. But every time he laughed too loud, every time he grew restless, she whispered, "I'm sorry. He won't be a problem." The words became reflex, stitched into her voice. Even her parents, once her anchors, grew distant. Daniel had been their pride, their hope. They never said it, but Claire felt it in their glances. The silent blame. At night, she tried to cook simple meals, burnt pasta, oversalted soup. Ethan would look up with wide eyes. "Mom, are you okay when you smile like that?" She kissed his forehead, choking back tears. He always knew. Too young, too perceptive. He would crawl into her lap, wordless, and hold her until she stopped shaking. "Don't worry, Mommy," he'd whisper. "I'll stay with you." His small arms held her together when nothing else could. Claire blinked back the memory, her eyes focusing again on Mark across the table. His gaze was steady, but distant, as though he too carried ghosts. Mark's story unfolded in silence that only he could hear. He sat there, but his mind rewound to a different boardroom, a different day. 2 years ago, he was at the peak. His company, Bennett Dynamics, was the talk of Wall Street. Investors shook his hand like he was untouchable. But power makes enemies. His co-founder, once his best friend, staged a coup with the board. Overnight, his name was erased from the letterhead of the company he had built with his own hands. The betrayal burned. But what gutted him deeper was Madison, the woman he thought he'd marry, leaving too. "You've become too distant," she had said coldly. "No one stays on a sinking ship." And Mark? He was sinking fast. He drove aimlessly that night, suit jacket still crisp, until he ended up at the park. Rain pelted him as he sat on that bench, bottle in hand, wondering if the world would even notice his absence. The plan was silence. But then came the footsteps, the crooked jacket, the boy's wide eyes, the tissue pressed into his shaking hand. "Mom says hearts just need hugs sometimes." The sentence carved itself into his soul. A lifeline, delivered by a child. He didn't open the bottle that night. He opened a notebook instead. Scribbled half-legible words about machines learning empathy. Aurora Systems was born out of that storm. But sitting here now, looking at Ethan again, older but unmistakably the same boy, Mark felt the circle closing. Claire sipped her tea nervously. "So, Mark, what exactly do you do now?" He hesitated, then answered plainly. "I build technology that tries to understand human feelings." She tilted her head. "That sounds impossible." Mark gave a half smile. So did surviving. Her eyes widened at the weight of those words. For a moment, she wanted to ask what he meant. But the silence between them said enough. Ethan broke the tension, holding up another drawing. "This one's for you. Mr. Mark, don't lose it." Mark took the paper, his hand trembling just slightly. 3 stick figures again, this time under a rainbow. Something cracked inside him, something tender and dangerous. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. "Thank you, buddy. I'll keep it safe." Later that night, Claire tucked Ethan into bed in their small apartment above the bookstore. She brushed his hair back, whispered goodnight, then sat at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills. She didn't see herself as strong. She saw the cracks, the failures, the apologies. She didn't know that across the city. Mark sat in his own apartment, staring at the drawing, tracing each crayon line with his thumb. Not too much, he whispered to himself, repeating the words he had told her. Neither of you are too much. For the first time in years, both of them separately, silently felt something flicker. Not quite hope, but something close. The next evening, Mark wrote an email. Short, simple. Dinner. No pressure. Maybe the three of us this time. Claire stared at the screen. Her hand trembled. She showed Ethan, who grinned wide. Does that mean he liked us? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled faintly. I think it means he wants to know us better. The Italian restaurant sat tucked between two brick buildings, its warm light spilling onto the quiet sidewalk. Inside, checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread made the air feel like home. Claire hesitated at the entrance, Ethan tugging at her hand. Mark was already there. He rose to his feet, wearing a navy sweater instead of a suit. Softer somehow. His eyes lit briefly when he saw them. Thank you for coming, he said, pulling out Ethan's chair first. Claire gave a small nod. Thank you for inviting us. They ordered. The waitress set down baskets of bread. Ethan slurped spaghetti noisily, then grinned. Don't tell Mom, but this is better than hers, Claire gasped. Ethan Mark chuckled, his shoulders relaxing. Your secret's safe with me, for a moment. Laughter replaced the weight that always sat on Claire's chest. She noticed how Mark listened, not just with his ears, but with his entire focus. It unnerved her and comforted her all at once. Ethan launched into an animated explanation about dinosaurs. The Triceratops has 3 horns. The Stegosaurus has plates, not spikes. His hands waved wildly, spaghetti nearly flying across the table. Mark leaned in. So which one's your favorite Stegosaurus? Ethan declared proudly. Why? Because it looks scary, but it's actually gentle. Mark's eyes flickered. He sat back, silent for a beat. Then he whispered, I get that. Halfway through dinner, Claire excused herself. She walked down the narrow hallway to the restroom, splashed water on her face, and steadied her breathing. When she returned, she paused just before the corner. Mark was leaning across the table, his voice low. I think your mom is stronger than she knows. Ethan tilted his head. She doesn't believe that. She will someday, Mark said quietly. Because it's true. Claire froze, her chest tightening. She pressed a hand against the wall, afraid her knees might buckle. Then she stepped forward before they could notice. After dinner, Mark suggested a walk. The night air was cool, the city buzzing just beyond the park gates. Ethan ran ahead, chasing his shadow under the lamps. Claire walked beside Mark, her steps uncertain. You're different tonight. He glanced over. Different how lighter, less like a man carrying storms in his eyes. He smiled faintly. Maybe I am. They walked in silence until Ethan stopped to watch a fountain shimmer under the light. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, Are you lonely? Mr. Mark. Mark knelt to meet his gaze. His voice caught for a second, then steadied. I used to be. Ethan nodded as if that made perfect sense. Then he dashed off again, leaving Mark and Claire standing side by side in quiet understanding. A week later, Mark sent another invitation. Not to dinner this time, but to see his world. Aurora Systems. The lab was sleek and sterile, all white walls and glowing monitors. Engineers murmured at their stations as the hum of machines filled the air. Mark led them inside with a quiet pride. "This is impressive," Claire whispered, her eyes sweeping across the room. Mark smiled faintly, though his gaze lingered on Ethan, who stared wide-eyed at the robot in the center. The machine was about the size of a child. Rounded edges, plastic casing safe to touch. Its eyes blinked blue. "That's Eli," Mark said. "Short for Emotional Learning Interface." Ethan stepped closer. "Does he talk, sort of?" One of the engineers chuckled. "But he's not very good at feelings yet." Mark crouched down beside Ethan. "We've been working on him for over a year. He's supposed to recognize emotions, facial expressions, tone, body language, but unpredictability confuses him." Claire raised a brow. "Sounds a lot like parenting." Mark laughed, softer than she'd ever heard. "Exactly." Ethan crouched in front of Eli, unafraid. The robot blinked, turned its head. A flat voice spoke. "Hello. How are you feeling today?" Ethan tilted his head. "You sound nervous." "I do not experience nervousness," Eli replied. "You kind of do," Ethan said gently. "Like you're scared you'll say the wrong thing." The lab fell silent. Engineers exchanged glances. The robot paused a delay not programmed into its responses. Then, its voice shifted slightly. "That must feel confusing," Eli said slowly. "Thinking love disappears when mistakes happen. But love stays, even when milk spills." Claire gasped softly, a hand covering her mouth. Mark's pulse raced. His team stared, stunned. That wasn't scripted. That was adaptive. Mark crouched beside Ethan. "What made you say that?" Ethan shrugged, fidgeting with his sleeve. "Because it happened. I thought Mom wouldn't love me after I spilled milk. But she did. She just hugged me." Claire's eyes brimmed with tears. The truth of her son's words filled the room, more powerful than any algorithm. Mark stood slowly, staring at Eli's blinking lights, then back at Ethan. His voice was hoarse. "You just unlocked what months of coding couldn't." That evening, Claire tucked Ethan into bed. He clutched a small toy dinosaur, already drifting toward sleep. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "You amaze me every day." In another part of the city, Mark sat alone in his office, staring at the lab reports. Eli had registered subtext, interpreted it, and generated a unique response. All because of a boy who spoke simple truth. He pressed a hand over his eyes, emotion swelling. "Through to the robot," he murmured. Then his voice broke into a whisper. "Through to me again." The next weekend, Mark invited them to the park. This time, no storms, no despair. Just a fatherless boy chasing pigeons, a weary mother watching with quiet love, and a man who never thought he'd laugh again. Claire sat on the bench as Mark joined her. Their hands brushed, not quite holding, not quite apart. The sound of Ethan's laughter filled the air like music. Claire turned to him. "Why us? Mark, why care so much?" He met her eyes. "Steady, because you both remind me that life isn't about surviving. It's about belonging." She exhaled, her heart aching. For the first time in years, she let herself believe him, even if only for a moment. But peace never lasted long. In the days ahead, life would test them. Misunderstandings would rise. Choices would cut deep. And before long, the fragile bond they were building would be pushed to the edge. For now, though, in the soft glow of the park, 3 lives leaned quietly toward each other. The world outside still carried storms, but in that small circle, something rare flickered. Not certainty, not promises, but hope. The bookstore smelled faintly of old paper and rain-soaked coats. Claire stacked a pile of novels near the window, Ethan doodling quietly at a table in the back. It was just another slow afternoon until her manager, Helen, walked over with a heavy look. "Claire, I'm sorry," Helen said softly. "The owners don't want children here during work hours anymore. They think it looks unprofessional." Claire froze. "He sits in the corner. He doesn't bother anyone." "I know," Helen whispered. "I fought for you, but rules are rules." Claire nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't cry. Not here. She simply packed Ethan's crayons into a box, held his small hand, and walked out into the drizzle. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, unpaid bills spread before her. Ethan slept in the next room, breathing softly. She whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry. I don't know how much longer I can do this." 2 days later, a letter arrived. Cream envelope, neat handwriting. It was from the city library. "We'd like to invite you to apply for a part-time position as children's reading assistant. You come highly recommended." Claire frowned. She hadn't applied anywhere. When she asked who recommended her, the director smiled gently. A man named Mark Bennett. Her heart lurched. That evening, she texted him, "Meet me. Just us." The diner was quiet, neon lights buzzing against the window. Mark arrived on time, his hair damp from the rain. Claire sat in a booth, hands clasped tight. "I found out about the library," she said flatly. Mark nodded once. "I thought you would. Why didn't you tell me?" He exhaled slowly. "Because I didn't want you to feel you owed me." Her eyes flashed. "That's exactly how it feels, Mark. Like I'm some project you're trying to fix." His brows furrowed. "It's not like that." "Then what is it? Gratitude, guilt?" He hesitated, voice low. "Maybe both. I do feel grateful, but never pity. Never." Claire stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice trembled. "I don't need saving. I needed honesty." Mark rose instinctively, reaching for her. "Claire." But she turned away, whispering, "I can't do this. Not if I'll always wonder why." She walked out into the rain. Mark stood in the doorway, rain soaking through his shirt. For the first time in years, the man who had rebuilt an empire felt helpless. That night, Claire curled on the couch, holding Ethan close. She kissed his hair, her tears dampening the strands. "We're okay," she whispered. "Just us. We'll be okay." But deep down, her chest ached with words she couldn't say. Why do I want him here, even when I push him away? Weeks passed in silence. The emails stopped. The calls never came. She told herself it was better this way. But when she saw Ethan's drawings, always with 3 figures, always with a man in a tie beside them, her heart broke a little more. Then one night, everything changed. It started with a fever. Ethan was unusually quiet at dinner, pushing food around his plate. By midnight, his skin was burning, his body trembling with chills. Claire's panic grew with every passing minute. She wrapped him in blankets, rushed to the emergency room, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She called neighbors. No one answered. She called old friends, straight to voicemail. Finally, her finger hovered over one name, Mark. Her pride screamed no, but her son whimpered in the back seat. She hit call. The line rang twice before he answered. His voice was groggy. Claire, tears blurred her vision. "It's Ethan. He's burning up. I'm at Mercy General. Please. I didn't know who else. I'm on my way." The call ended before she could reply. At that very moment, Mark stood on stage, a packed auditorium, cameras flashing, investors waiting. It was the biggest presentation of the year. But as soon as he heard her voice, he handed the microphone to his stunned assistant and walked straight out. Rain poured as he ran through the hospital doors. He spotted Claire in the pediatric waiting room, her hands clasped, her eyes red. When she saw him, her breath caught. Neither spoke. He simply sat down beside her. 102.8, she murmured. They're giving him fluids. Running tests. Mark placed a steady hand on her back. He's strong. He'll fight. Her voice cracked. I was so scared. I know, he whispered. When the nurse allowed them in, Ethan lay pale and small in a bed far too big. Wires snaked around him, machines beeping steadily. Claire sat on one side, Mark on the other. Without hesitation, Mark reached across and took Ethan's tiny hand. He didn't let go all night. Hours passed, marked only by the rhythm of monitors and the shuffle of nurses. Claire dozed off in the chair, her head against the wall. Mark stayed upright, eyes fixed on Ethan, his grip firm. At dawn, Ethan stirred. His eyelids fluttered. His gaze searched weakly. Then, his lips parted. Dad. The word hung in the sterile air. Claire's eyes snapped open. Mark froze, every muscle trembling. Dad? Ethan whispered again, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Tears streamed down Mark's face before he could stop them. He bowed his head, pressing his forehead against the small hand he held, shoulders shaking. Claire covered her mouth, her own eyes brimming. She should have spoken. But the sight of him, this man, always composed, broken open by one word, left her speechless. For the first time, she realized she wasn't carrying everything alone anymore. When morning light filtered through the blinds, Ethan slept peacefully. Claire and Mark sat silently, exhaustion etched into their faces. Finally, Claire whispered, "Why did you come?" Mark lifted his head, his voice raw. "Because when you called, there was no choice. There never will be." She turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. By the time Ethan was released days later, color had returned to his cheeks. Kids bounced back, doctors said. But between Claire and Mark, things were fragile, careful. They exchanged polite words. Thank you. Take care. But nothing deeper. The wound between them had not yet healed. Still, that night, as Claire tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at her with sleepy eyes. Mom? When I called him Dad, he cried. That means he belongs. Right. Her throat tightened. She brushed hair from his forehead. Sleep now, sweetheart. But in her heart, the question echoed. Does he rain had passed? But the street still glistened. Claire sat at the kitchen table, flipping through Ethan's sketchbook. Page after page. 3 figures stood hand in hand. Always a sun, always a balloon, always a man beside them. Her throat tightened. She whispered to herself, He belongs, doesn't he? But she closed the book, unwilling to face what her heart already knew. The next morning, a knock sounded at her door. Claire opened it cautiously, and there he was. Mark stood without flowers, without rehearsed words, only a quiet resolve. Come with me, he said simply. Claire hesitated, but Ethan squealed, grabbing his jacket. Let's go. Mom. The boy's excitement drowned her doubt. She locked the door and followed. The car ride was silent, except for Ethan humming softly in the back seat. Claire glanced sideways. Mark's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale. jaw tight. He wasn't the polished CEO tonight, he was just a man bracing himself. They stopped at a small park outside the city. Golden leaves littered the path. Claire recognized it instantly. Her breath caught. This place. Mark nodded. I didn't bring you here by accident. They walked beneath the tall oak trees until Mark stopped in front of a weather-worn bench. His eyes lingered on it like it carried the weight of his soul. 2 years ago, he began quietly. I came here to end everything. I lost my company. I lost the woman I thought I'd marry. I lost myself. Claire's chest tightened, but she stayed silent, letting him speak. I sat right there. Mark continued, pointing to the bench, with a bottle in my hand and no reason left. And then a boy walked up, gave me a tissue, told me hearts just need hugs. His voice broke. That boy was Ethan. Claire gasped softly, covering her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned toward her son, who was busy gathering leaves near the tree. Mark's voice shook. He saved me before I even knew his name. He reminded me I wasn't invisible. And now, here I am, standing with both of you. Because of that moment, he reached into his pocket. Slowly, he knelt on one knee. In his hand was a simple silver ring. The words, "Still here," engraved inside. I don't want to fix you. Claire, he said, eyes locked on hers. And I don't need fixing either. I just want to keep showing up until this feels like home for all of us. Claire's tears spilled over. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Mark, I don't know if I'm enough for you. You're everything. He cut in firmly. You and Ethan. You're the reason I'm still breathing. You're the reason I believe again. Tiny footsteps pattered toward them. Ethan threw his arms around both, his voice muffled against their coats. Hearts just need hugs sometimes. Claire laughed through her tears, her arms circling her son and the man kneeling before her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times. Mark slipped the ring onto her trembling finger. Claire kissed the top of Ethan's head, her heart swelling with a peace she hadn't felt in years. Later, the three of them strolled along the trail. Leaves crunched beneath their feet. Ethan twirled with a balloon he'd begged for at a vendor's cart, laughter ringing through the crisp air. Claire leaned into Mark's side, her hand finding his. For once, she didn't pull away. You're really here, she murmured. Mark pressed a kiss against her hair. Still here, always. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they returned to the bench. Ethan placed a bright red leaf into Mark's palm. His face was solemn. Keep this, in case your heart needs a hug again. Mark's throat tightened. He closed his hand around the leaf like it was glass. Thank you, buddy. More than you know. Claire watched, her chest aching with a mix of joy and disbelief. She had spent so long apologizing for existing. Tonight, for the first time, she felt chosen. Weeks passed. Life didn't magically smooth itself out. Bills still arrived. Work was still uncertain. But dinners were warmer now. Laughter filled the spaces silence once ruled. Ethan would crawl into Mark's lap with crayons, insisting he draw dinosaurs. Claire would catch Mark watching her with the kind of gaze that made her blush. Even in her own kitchen, they weren't perfect, but they were present, together, and that was more than enough. One Saturday afternoon, Claire stood on the library stage during a children's reading event. Parents and kids filled the room. Ethan sat in the front row, grinning. Mark leaned against the wall in the back, his eyes steady on her. She opened a worn book and began to read. Her voice trembled at first, then grew strong. For the first time, she wasn't just reading for others. She was speaking for herself. Afterward, a parent approached. "You have a gift. Your son must be proud." Claire glanced at Ethan, then at Mark, who nodded softly. She smiled through tears. "Yes, he is. And so am I." That night, at home, Ethan climbed into bed and whispered, "Mom, we're not just two anymore. We're three." She kissed his forehead, whispering back, "Yes, we're three." Down the hall, Mark sat in the living room, the red leaf resting on the table beside him. He stared at it, remembering the boy in the rain, the woman who carried storms, and the family he almost never found. As the story closed, the camera of life panned out a boy, a mother, and a man who once thought he had nothing left. Sometimes, the smallest hands save you in ways you never expect. Sometimes, love arrives when you've forgotten how to believe. And sometimes, the family you need is the one you choose. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys that inspire and heal. Your support means the world and helps us bring even more stories to life. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and may your days be filled with love that feels like home.